And welcome to the Nerdy Agent Podcast Business Tip of the Week.
Business tip.
It's the one where we talk about first-time homebuyers.
That was good.
Today we're going to talk about key things to do with first-time homebuyers. Who wants to start it off?
Ooh, we didn't even plan out who talks
I have
first
the first thing. The first thing you have to do with first-time homebuyers is you have to sit down with them.
Buyer meeting.
And have a buyer meeting. You have to figure out what they want. You have to figure out what questions they have initially. You have to figure out, you have to teach them about the buying process, the 10 steps that we've put together. You have to chat with them about financing, figure out what that looks like. And then from there, where would you take
Well,
them?
I just think as an agent, the thing that we forget about most is that we've done this a bunch of times. So we already have the expectations in our brain. We don't have to be told them. And every buyer and seller needs to be educated. But expectation setting with first-time homebuyers is the number one most important thing. So that buyer meeting is huge.
The whole process, you have to, I love first-time home buyers because in a way it actually makes me a better agent every time I work with one, because it's not as simple as like, I've got an investor who's done this 30 times. I just find the right house for him. And then I'm just like, all right, you got it figured out. With a first-time home buyer, you have to be there every single step of the way. You set great expectations up front. You get a lot of information from them about exactly what they're looking for. And then the other big thing I do with first-time home buyers is as much as they tell you what they're looking for, and I experienced this when I bought my first house, right? We searched for like 9 months and we went through like 45 different types of houses. And my agent, I hope she doesn't listen to this, but she wasn't good at narrowing my search for me. I had to do that myself. So I was like, I want to be in Chanhassen. And then a month later, I was like, I don't want to be in Chanhassen. That's too far from work. And then I was trying to be in Minnetonka. And I was like, that's too expensive. And then we ended up in St. Louis Park, which is nowhere near the other two, right? Whereas with first-time home buyers, I will show them a wide swath of properties that fit the things that they talked about in one day. So let's just do like 8 in one day. And then we'll talk about pluses and minuses of every single one at every single house. I usually do like a grading system where I'm like, give me a 1 to 10 on every house that we see. And then that grading system shifts. And as they like ones versus don't like ones, both the grading system of the houses and the locations, as well as like the trade-offs you have to make because you're not going to get everything you want, I start asking a lot of questions about those things because you're trying to narrow the search for yourself as an agent to help them figure out what they want. But you're also trying to set the stage for them of, how do you guys kind of narrow your own search down so we don't go from this wide swath and stay here and hope we find it? We're like, we know exactly what we need by like the end of the first day of showings.
And the word that that describes what Josh is talking about that I talk about often is funneling.
Yep.
So most people, if they come to you and they want your services, they should want some sort of guidance and support and funneling. Like if they meet with you and they say, I want to buy a house by this date, and here's what I think I can afford. And if they haven't talked to a lender, you get them with a lender and they figure out what they can afford and all those things. But then once you actually get out and start executing on your search, you start seeing houses, you start sending them stuff, narrowing it in, like Josh said, and moving them towards making an offer is going to make their experience significantly better.
And it's going to take longer for a first-time home buyer because they don't know what they want, right? They think they know what they want, but they're scared because they've never done it before. They're uncomfortable. And so you have to really, you're not pushing them, you're educating them so that they're smarter along the way so they know when they finally get to the right one.
On top of that first time going out to narrowing down what they want, I've also found it helpful to chat through houses and teach them about houses.
Everything.
Teach them about what we're looking for when we go through the house. Teach them about what stuff costs, because when I stand next to a furnace for the first time and tell them one of these suckers costs about $6,000 to $7,000, I always get wide eyes. Like they had no idea that it cost that much. So just teaching them the basics of houses and what they're going to need to know that first time out as well is super helpful.
You know what's funny is I was thinking about this the other day. I've bought and sold. I bought my house. I sold my house. I bought a new house. I sold that house. I bought a new house. I sold that house. I bought a house. I've had 7 transactions, and AJ's the only person I've worked with more than once. Before I became a real estate agent, I had 7 transactions before I became a real estate agent.
You've worked with me like 9 times.
On rental properties, but so every transaction I had outside of that,
with
like
a different agent.
With a different agent.
Yeah,
no one ever was like pointing those things out. I was shocked to learn that after the fact.
Interesting.
But like I've experienced a wide variety of real estate agents supporting me through transactions. But the reality is most of them, I would say all of them with the exception of AJ, didn't know about houses, about the product, about what it's like supposed to be like, what you're supposed to do. And none of them communicated that well. They just mostly like walk into a house and ask if it was cute. Like it was such a consistent theme of real estate agents. And we talk about it all the time with our team is, to your point, know the product you're selling, because you have to be able to tell them if this is a good house or a bad house. Otherwise, they find themselves in a house and then they're like, why did I buy this house?
But setting the tone early for that is the most important part, right?
Yep.
Because
rip it apart.
Because naturally, dad's going to show up to one of the showings, and dad's going to act like he knows a lot of stuff. And maybe he does know a lot of stuff, and he can be your helper throughout the process.
Yep.
Or maybe he just becomes the helper at some point, right? Because that does happen. Family members, whoever comes through, you have to be knowledgeable. You have to be the smartest person in that house about the house, or you're not going to be able to do a great job. Because if mom or dad or uncle who's a general contractor comes in and they just know way more than you, then you're just kind of looking at them like, do you think this is a good decision?
You lose credibility immediately.
Yeah, and they're just in protective mode.
Yep.
Right? And so you've got to be careful that you don't put yourself in situations where you're no longer the one that's funneling them down towards a purchase because someone's just always throwing roadblocks up in your way.
And you're not smart enough or knowledgeable enough to get those roadblocks out of the way, or you should have known they were roadblocks beforehand.
You should have been putting the roadblocks up yourself.
Yep.
Exactly.
And the best way to learn about all of these different things throughout the transaction is to listen to our old podcasts, because we've talked about just about all of them at some point.
Yeah. One more tip that I would throw out there. This is something that I only do with I mostly do with my first-time home buyers, but the other thing that they're not knowledgeable about is the state of the market, right? So they hear it's crazy, they hear rates are high, they hear all these things. But helping them understand the realities of the market that they're operating within is very important. So after that first week of showings, they're probably not going to buy anything the first time you go out with them, right? The expectation should not be that a first-time home buyer goes out for 8 showings and buys a house the first weekend. So the next week on Tuesday, I will review all 8 houses that we saw, and I will send an email overview saying, here is the current status of every one of the houses we saw. Because when the market was crazy, sometimes they're like, these houses all sucked. And I'm like, this one's pending. It sold no inspection the first weekend. This one went under contract. This one didn't sell. But you create better expectations about what they're going to walk into when they do finally make an offer, when you show them the reality of what happened.
And you empower them to make the right decisions as they go too, right? So when you make a suggestion, they're like, oh yeah, that's what we were thinking anyways, because you've had proper communication throughout the process.
Yep. But that email made a huge difference with first-time home buyers for me. And I still do it with anyone that I show with.
It's awesome.
That's all we have this week on the Nerdy Agent Podcast Business Tip of the Week.
Business tip. Business tip of the week.